Confronting the Darkness. I'm Rob Jacobs.
And I'm Father Bob Bailey. Today, we're going to continue with a series that we've begun on Christian paranormal or supernatural events. And I'm very happy to welcome today friends of mine, Dick and Diane, who are here from Rhode Island, and they are what I consider experts on a phenomenon that happened in the 1960s of Marian apparitions in Garabandal, Spain. This is an extremely interesting apparition because of the phenomenon. You want to talk about supernatural phenomenon? This is incredible. And so I want to hand it over to Diane and Dick. Maybe I'll ask you, how many times have you been to Garabandal?
We have been there 21 times.
21 times.
We have been every year since our first trip in 1991 until my husband got sick in 2012, so 21 years.
I just missed it going with you. And you can explain where Garabandal is in Spain.
Yeah, Garabandal is a very remote village in the north of Spain, in the, I never say it right, Cantabrian or Cantabrian Mountains. Very near the coast, and beautiful area of Spain is very beautiful anyway. And we know that because from Madrid to the village, we've many times taken the bus ride, which takes, I don't know, 6 hours?
6 hours.
About 6 hours. So you get to see the countryside when you're in a bus for that long. Beautiful, beautiful, mostly country, mostly farm. The village itself, at the time of the apparitions, was very remote. I think they may have had electricity, but they may not have. But that was all. They had no paved roads, no phones. At the time, now that was in '61 when the apparition started. In 1991, which was our first trip, it wasn't much different. They had electricity and they did have telephones. They still had no paved roads. The trip up the mountain to get to the village was precarious in a big bus on a very narrow little road. And so those of us who thought our fears were over when we arrived safely after a plane flight over the ocean had another, hair-raising experience. But very, very beautiful, but farm.
Right. And from what I understand, that other than what you were saying, the village really hasn't changed. The people still keep up with their religious tradition, the Angelus, going to the Angelus, the Rosary, and that much has not been affected by the popularity of the apparitions or the notoriety of the apparitions, which is a beautiful thing.
Yes, it's very, very true. They have the little woman who goes through the village at night ringing the bell, calling people to pray for the souls in purgatory. And they do. They have their devotions, I believe daily, but for sure on Sundays, of the women, mostly the women, gathering in the village church to say the rosary. And when we were there on pilgrimage, we joined them.
Nice.
And so it's a very beautiful thing. But it's a wonderful place. Definitely not a resort, but a very, very, you feel holiness there. I mean, we always did, yeah. So it's very.
And before we get into the actual phenomenon, maybe you could give us a little background about the apparition, the message, and the apparition of Garabandal.
The message is really the same as what Our Lady's been saying in all of her apparitions. Basically it's a call to repentance and conversion. I don't believe, some of the specific things she said might be a little bit different, but the basic message is the same. Return to the Lord, do penance. She calls specifically for visits to the Holy Eucharist, making holy hours, and the Blessed Sacrament, making it an important part of our lives. Obedience, not only in the church, but very, very much so with the children. She talked about obedience to their families and things like that, and it was just nothing new under the sun as far as we know, just basic conversion.
Right. It almost was like a reaffirmation of Fatima.
Mhm.
That Fatima was not adhered to as much as heaven would have liked it.
Mhm.
So she came at Garabandal to really underscore the same message: prayer, penance, sacrifice, and but more with a warning tone. Now, when Our Lady came at Fatima, it was the hope of the world and all that, but the world didn't respond as it should. So Our Lady came to say, I'm warning you because of what the consequences are going to be if you don't live out the message of peace, if you don't pray, if you don't sacrifice for unbelievers, if you don't work towards that, then what's going to happen is you're going to, wars are going to come out because, there's been no conversion of heart.
And even in Garabandal, Our Lady gave two main messages. One in 1961, which was, we must, make penance, visit the Blessed Sacrament, but first we must lead good lives. And then the 4 years that followed were the phenomenon, proving, I think, to people, that this is for real, this is from God, and, because there's no other way these things could have happened. 4 years later, her second message was exactly that. Since my message of 1961 has not been made well known or adhered to, I'm warning you, this is the last one. And then she spoke about problems within the church and the coming chastisement if people don't change. And, that is almost 60 years ago.
60
Oh my
years ago.
goodness, yeah. So.
Yeah, and maybe you could highlight the three events that are coming out of Garabandal, the three supernatural events that were going to happen.
Yeah, the prophecies that Our
The
Lady made,
prophecies.
and that's, I think what's holding up approval is we're waiting for those
Sure.
prophecies to be fulfilled, but the
But
first...
as of right now, though, priests and people can go there.
Oh, absolutely.
So it has not been condemned, contrary to what many people
Right.
believe.
Right, and it has never been condemned.
No.
But the first is a warning, and that is something that everyone on earth will feel and experience, and they will feel it within themselves, and they will know that it is from God. It says everyone will acknowledge that this comes from God, okay? It will be a call to, we'll see ourselves as God sees us,
Like
and-
the illumination of
Right,
conscience.
Right, and not in our own inflated sense of,
Right.
who we are, but yes, the illumination of conscience. And then the second event will be the miracle. There will be a miracle that will take place on a Thursday evening in the month of April at 8:30. Very specific,
Yeah.
the criteria are very specific. Between the 8th and the
8th and the
16th or the
8th and
18th.
18th.
8th and 18th. And
On the feast of a little-known martyr of the Eucharist.
Martyr of the Eucharist.
But it won't. But also, I think it won't coincide with a church event, right?
Well, it said it will be a day of importance for the church, but it won't be on the feast day of our Lord.
Right,
So,
like not Holy Thursday or
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, I don't know about that.
Or maybe not Easter
That I
then.
don't- Right.
Right.
So it'll be the warning, and then the miracle, and then a permanent sign will be left. Oh, about the miracle, what is said is that, or what Our Lady promised, was that all those in Garabandal who are there or are on the surrounding mountains who can see the place of the miracle, which will happen over the place of the pines, which has significance in the village, the sick will be healed, the unbelievers will believe. So it's wonderful promises.
And the pines were up on a hill, right? And they're just a cluster of pine trees, like in is it a circle?
Mhm.
Right. And that's what
Right.
Our Lady was talking about above.
The pine tree, and it is just outside. It's a little bit of a walk up a rocky path to get there. You don't get some pines by accident. You have to head out to go there.
And I might add, the first time we went there, by accident, I saw a poster at St. Mary's Church saying that Maria Sirocco was going to give a talk on an apparition. We had never heard of the apparition, and it was on a Sunday night, and I just happened to glance and I saw it. So, we talked about it. We said, well, it sounds interesting. Why don't we go? So we went, and she gave a beautiful presentation, and that particular aspect of it was anyone who was going to be there would be cured. And at the time I had, severe arthritis in my knees. I was you know, it was really painful and everything else. And I said, well, you know, maybe it'll happen this year. Why don't we go?
Nice.
So we'll be there and I'll be cured. You know, that was our first thing. And we went, of course, nothing happened. And then we said, well, I don't know about going the next year. And then we went the second time. And then we just fell in love with it. And it wasn't, you know, the cure that I might get if something happened. It was more the spiritual aspect of it. And it was just, you just felt like you were in another world up there, like in heaven. And all the people that came on the pilgrimages, and we had anywhere from 28 to 107, 108, you know, in one year. They were always different. But so after that, it wasn't, you know, whether I get cured or not, it was the spiritual aspect of it that was so powerful for us.
Yeah. And Dick, how many children did Our Lady appear to there?
4.
4, and 4 girls, right?
Yep.
And their ages roughly?
They were all 12 and 13, 11 to
11 and
13.
12.
Or 11 and 12, yeah. And the amazing part, how it happened, they were just playing, the 4 of them, on the path that goes up to the pines. And, you know, all of a sudden, you know, they saw this beautiful, Diane, you can explain it probably a little better,
Yeah.
exactly how they first met.
Right. So they were, you know, there's not a lot to do in Garabandal in 1961, and so the 4 girls were out playing on one of the pathways. And, you know, the story goes that they had stolen an apple and they were, you know, but eating the apple and all that sort of thing. And they heard a loud clap of thunder, beautiful, clear day, loud clap of thunder. One of the girls, excuse me, and I forget, I think it might have been Conchita, but I'm not sure, was the first to fall into ecstasy, and the other girls thought that she was sick, and they were getting ready to go and tell her mother. And the same thing happened to them. And so the 4 of them fell to their knees, and it wasn't Our Lady that they saw, though it was an angel. And it turned out to be Michael the Archangel who appeared to them.
Just like at Fatima, when the angel first came to prepare them for Our Lady, same thing here, only it was Our Lady's right-hand angel.
Right-hand man.
And if you look right in front here, the picture, that is what Our Lady looked like when she appeared at Garabandal with the brown scapular on her wrist. And she wanted to be known as
Our Lady of Carmel.
Of Carmel, right, of Carmel. And this is a statue of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, the traditional
And we got
one.
this in Spain.
You
actually.
did?
Yeah. So, but just to finish, and then, I don't know if I mentioned, the 3rd event would be a permanent sign. And then, if all of that fails, there's a contingent 4th event, which would be a great chastisement that is predicted to fall upon mankind if we don't really wake up and respond.
Right, and the miracle, the permanent sign would be able to be seen, but not touched.
Photographed,
And photographed, but not touched.
But not touched, right. So,
So,
I've tried to imagine what it could be,
I
but
know.
I can't.
And a lot of people speculated, but we don't know.
Yeah, yeah, so,
Some point maybe.
yeah, yeah.
No, and none of the girls were related.
They were not. 3 of them had the same last name, but they were not related, yeah.
Found that interesting too, and just the amount of time some of the ecstasies would last for the girls.
They, you know, that's one of the things that people think points to, you know, obviously this is a supernatural event
Right.
because clearly, number one, they could not have done it themselves, and their health, the doctors were amazed that their health wasn't ruined within the first few months, right, of all of this, because these apparitions would take place once Our Lady began. They saw St. Michael on June 18th, I think it was, and for 10 days he appeared to the girls, and that was all. They didn't see Our Lady until it was in July, early July, I think July 2nd. And from that point on, she appeared at all different times, you know, day, night. They would last hours. It was really, really very stressful. It developed into not just ecstasies, but ecstatic walks through the village, falls, amazing.
And the walks where their head would be back like this, walking on the stone, you know.
Walking on their knees, walking backwards, down the hill from the pines. I mean, you can't appreciate that unless you've been there and you've stood at the pines and looked down that drop. And there were eyewitnesses who said they couldn't believe it. And when the girls were on their knees going backwards down the rocky path, they couldn't keep up with them. I mean,
Right.
they just couldn't keep up with them. They were just amazing, amazing stories.
And in the course of the 4 years, there were over 2,000 apparitions.
Right.
So sometimes, many times, it would be more than one time a day.
Oh, yeah.
And even walking on the knees for so long, there were never any bruises.
Never
or
any
marks.
bruises. No.
Nothing.
And that's what they were amazed. They said when the girls would go to their knees, it would be like
Right.
a crash. Nothing.
And they'd always come out of it feeling very good, smiling.
They would be, they could be all night in ecstasy, and then in the following day continue on their normal duties. Families were exhausted, falling into bed, not under, and the families truly suffered because it was a physical wear and tear on them, psychological, seeing their children suffer this, but the children suffered nothing from it.
Right.
And, as a great balance, they didn't hesitate to have science and psychology come in
Correct.
so could you tell a little bit about that they had?
Sure. They had medical doctors who came to evaluate the girls during the ecstasies. They had psychiatrists. They had one doctor, his name was Morales, and he had originally thought it was a fraud and felt that it was, not really an apparition. Later changed his mind, called a big conference, and he said his closing words of his conference were, "I will spend the rest of my day." He said, "Our Lady brought about this change in me," but I don't know the specifics of how that happened. But his final words at his conference were, "I will spend the rest of my days asking Our Lady to keep me under her wing, under her mantle, and have mercy on me." And he truly was a believer and a promoter of Garabandal. But other doctors as well examined the girls, and they were found to be perfectly normal.
And during the ecstasy, when they poked them,
They said after one apparition, one of the girls, the back, because she had been kneeling, and they were sticking pins in her knees, in her legs, covered with pinpricks, but she never felt a thing, never, had, the girls would be unable to be moved. I mean, they would be on their knees, and grown men would try to pick them up, and it's like they were lead statues, they couldn't move them.
Wow.
But the girls could pick each other up to kiss Our Lady goodbye.
Wow.
It was just
and another thing, people would give them religious articles, and you would see the, in the videos, just kiss, and then they would be able to give it back to the right person.
right. And have no idea
No
who it
idea who-
belonged to, because
Because they were handed up. to
they were
them.
on a table,
Right.
and when Our Lady came, the girls would pick them up and she would kiss them. And then with their heads back, I mean, not even looking at the people, they would be following the Virgin, and she would be saying, "This one is this, medal, people gave wedding rings, rosary scapulars, all that," and they always gave it back to the right person,
Wow.
so
And didn't she in the beginning teach them the rosary and certain prayers too?
she did.
While they were in ecstasy?
She did, and the big point about the rosary was how she wanted them to pray it. And there's even some videos that show the girls saying the rosary, and it's so slow and so thoughtful, and not at all like the way we kind of say the rosary sometimes. So it was beautiful, to hear the girls. And one of the sweetest things is if you ever get to see the video of the eyewitnesses, there are others that have all kinds of tape from the events, but with the girls like whispering, talking to Our Lady, like nobody else can see her, but these 4 little girls are just whispering like children
And the
would
face,
with
the
them.
facial expressions.
Mhm.
Now, if anybody wants to see that, because really, I mean, we can explain the phenomenon, but unless you see that, you can go onto YouTube and say Garabandal, Garabandal, Garabandal Spain apparitions, and they'll have actually footage, or you can get pictures if you go to
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
images, and especially I like Ricardo Montalban when he did the Marian apparition in the
Of the
20th
20th century,
and
yeah.
he did Garabandal.
Mhm.
But I think the one that really touched me was the videotape of communion.
Well,
No.
yeah.
Yeah. Now it's almost like reminds me of the Sabruta tape, with JFK, which was the only thing that took the assassination. Just there was one videographer who was just there, and what I understand, St. Michael would give them communion
Mhm.
each day, okay? They asked where the communion come from. They would take it from one of the tabernacles. The angel would take it from the consecrated
That's right.
place. And of course, they would, they would just kneel and receive it. This one lone videographer taped it, and you can see her, kneeling down with her mouth open. You can see the host on the mouth, and that was
And that was
amazing.
predicted that would be given that night.
Right,
Ah,
as a
I
sign.
didn't realize
Yeah,
that.
that people could see the actual communion.
Yeah, and so there was a huge crowd.
They were calling it an invisible communion
Right.
beforehand.
Right.
Right.
And that was amazing. That was absolutely amazing.
With all it seems to me now in Fatima, 100,000 people plus saw the phenomenon of the sun,
Mhm.
and when the earth dried up from the soaking rain. So there was, again, how can you? It's not you dispute that it wasn't mass hysteria. Everything was dry, but it seems that lady was more desperate to have people try to believe. I mean, because the phenomenon was just
Mhm.
so intense there, and still.
Yeah,
And still, most people have not heard about
yeah, I
Garabandal.
know, I know.
And that's why I wanted to highlight this, because there's such supernatural events.
Mhm.
Again, you talk about paranormal. What is paranormal? Above the normal. This happens in the Christian faith too. It's not, paranormal isn't something about just ghosts and phenomenon and all of that, but it's supernatural.
Mhm.
And if we would only listen, if you want to have peace in the world, first we need to look into our lives, ourselves, be peaceful in ourselves, and then let that trickle on, and to pray for people that they would come to that same experience,
Yeah.
But we can see the results of not having listened.
Oh, everything that Our Lady predicted at Garabandal has come true.
Yeah.
The troubles in the church, troubles in families.
That was the interesting thing, because she said priest against priest, bishop against bishop. Now, back in 1961, the bishop that tells us, oh, no, that would never happen. That never happened.
Yeah.
Now look,
Yeah,
Yeah.
There's all kinds of-
you have all these disputes, even among church leaders and stuff like that. It just, it came true.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that was one of the things that the church, a lot of priests said they didn't believe that
Right.
this was happening, because one of her statements was that many priests, bishops, and cardinals would go on the way to perdition.
That's right. That's
Towards
right.
evil, and
Yeah.
they said no, she would never, Blessed
sin.
Mother would never say that about a priest. And
And look at today,
Mhm.
the scandals, and some instances the cover-ups, and
Mhm.
that's sin. It's wrong, and it's crystal
which
clear.
just shows priests are as human as everyone else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the devil, I think the devil hits the priest more than anybody, because that's
Goes
who he
after
wants
them
to
for sure,
destroy.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, because we're on Confronting the Darkness, can you tell us anything about the involvement of evil or Satan connecting with Garabandal?
I don't know.
I know you had mentioned.
Well, I mentioned that, the devil was present there, but I don't know any specifics.
Now, did they see him?
I don't think so.
No, but there was
How, okay.
an event or one of the visions called the Night of the Screams,
Oh, yes.
where the girls were up on the pines, and they all of a sudden everybody could just hear them. Well, regular people, not the visionaries, were up on the hill, but everyone else was told to stay back, and they were given a vision of the chastisement. No, I thought it was they had a vision of hell, but it was a vision of the chastisement, and it was called the Night of the Screams because the girls would just scream and scream, and then when the people prayed, the screaming would stop, and then the minute they stopped praying, the screams again. But I'm trying to recall any instances of. I don't recall.
Well, yeah. Well, that itself was.
But didn't they say that would be the worst punishment that
Oh yeah,
man had ever
yeah. They
seen?
said, it would be better you know, for people to die and then to go through this, and, you know, it would be
Was
worse.
it there that said 2/3 of the people in the chastisement, was that?
Oh,
I
I
think that's
don't
something
remember.
else.
That I don't remember.
The priest
but
with his people, it might have
I
been,
don't know.
don't quote me on that, that might have been
Yeah.
another apparition.
Yeah, that I don't recall. But all I know is the phenomenon have to, anybody who is, sees them, whether on videotape or, there's just no denying that something major and supernatural had occurred. You know?
Yeah, so when I was a brand new priest in my hometown, I was introduced to Maria Sirocco. Maria Sirocco, a beautiful woman, apostle of Garabandal from California, and would go all over the country and probably beyond speaking on Garabandal. So I hosted her at my parish, not without some negative, because some people, even in the church, said that the apparition had been condemned. I said, "No, I'm sorry, you don't. They're not. I'm sorry."
Never.
And I gave the proof. So I had it, but it was worth it because of the message. So many people were able to hear the message, and it was full. The room was full, and Maria Sirocco gave me a page. Now, what would happen is when Our Lady would kiss all these things, articles, she would have a prayer book, and Our Lady kissed that prayer book, and Maria gave me a page from, I think it's the Imitation of Christ, her book. And I have that framed in my chapel. I forgot to bring it with me, but it's something I treasure, from the apparitions. But also many of these are little prayer cards that I was given. And it has a piece of a teeny piece of a page kissed by Our Lady during the apparitions, and so I treasure that also. But for what I remember, they said, if you carry this, you will be blessed, but you will also suffer. So I didn't want to put it in right away in my wallet.
Well, what Our Lady did say was that anyone who, if you carry or wear a piece of this with faith and devotion, you'll do your purgatory on earth.
Right.
So, that's quite a promise.
Yeah.
That's really fun. But you talk about the devil being active. Now, when you said you had Maria Sirocco, I remember some stories that she told about the persecutions and things that she went through in trying to spread this message. But the one that sticks in my head the most was the time she was out somewhere giving, or preparing to give a lecture, and she was in somebody's house and they had a dog. And the dog, who I guess was known to be pretty friendly, went after her and actually bit her,
Wow.
not on the arm or the leg, but on the mouth, on her face, because she's convinced, because she was due to give a lecture that night. She ended up in the emergency room and had, I think she probably had to have stitches.
Wow.
And she went ahead and gave her a talk, but she was convinced that was satanic.
Well,
No.
I think the whole instance of the fact that it had gone unnoticed, when it has so much to it, is so rich of an apparition and events, for that to have gone, and it also, there was a connection to what would happen with the council. I don't remember what the Vatican Council, but even the fact that one of them later, for a period of time, I don't know if they call it amnesia or whatever, that spiritual amnesia, that she began to doubt herself, one of the visionaries. And unfortunately, that, I think there was a prophecy of that's what
That's
happened
exactly
to a lot
right.
of people in the church, after
Well,
the 60s.
Our Lady told the girls that there would come a time when they would contradict one against the other. And they did. And I'm not sure if it was just a few of them or all of them began to doubt. And they weren't sure, and they felt like, well, maybe we're misleading the people. And it was like an amnesia kind of thing. But when they were questioned, they would go to the priest or whoever and say, I'm sorry, we've been lying. We haven't seen Our Lady, but she had a blue dress and, a white veil and all that. And they would say, well, how can you describe her to me if you haven't seen her? I don't know. And Our Lady told them that they would have to suffer that because they would be undergoing the same confusion as the church.
That's what,
Yeah,
that's what it was.
And one of them, I'm not sure which one, saw Padre Pio and went to visit Padre Pio and told him all about it.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
They asked him, should we go to Garabandal and believe in it? And he said yes.
Yeah, Padre
You know,
Pio was
so
a
he's
definitely
the same.
Definitely.
believer.
Yeah, he was a definite believer. He actually is the one who directed Joey Lomangino to go as well.
That's
Yeah.
another thing, that's another phenomenon yet to happen.
Mhm.
Joey Lomangino was a person who's blind since his birth or since
No, a tire exploded
That's right.
and he lost his eyesight and his sense of smell. And I don't remember how old he was when that happened, but he had heard about Garabandal and had gone to visit Padre Pio. And in conversing with Padre Pio, he asked him, is the Blessed Mother appearing in Garabandal? And Padre Pio said, yes, she is. And he said, should I go? And he said, yes, you should go. And when he was visiting Padre Pio, when Joey was visiting Padre Pio, his sense of smell returned.
Wow.
And then he went and he struck up a great friendship with the girls, the 4 visionaries in Garabandal. And Our Lady told the girls that on the day of the miracle, he would regain his sight, he would see the miracle, and then he would see forever, I think was how she phrased it.
And if you saw a picture of him, his eyes, he has no eyes.
Wow.
Yeah,
He
it's
lost
like-
the eyes and they're just totally closed.
Yeah.
I could go on talking about this all day, but we are actually beyond the half-hour point,
Oh, okay.
which is fine, because it's been a great conversation, but I think we have to wrap up this episode.
Okay.
Well, we thank you so much, because it's such a rich, but again, if you want to see more, go on YouTube, or you could go on the internet on Garabandal Spain and get some more information. And we urge you to see this, and hopefully the Lord will touch you as it touched us.
Mm.
So
Or if you
remember,
live in Rhode Island, you can go to Holy Cross Church in Providence on Hartford Avenue, and Father Bailey would explain, he could even,
Right.
have you talk to us and we could
Yeah,
show you
absolutely.
the movies. So.
absolutely. So remember, when confronting the darkness
Put on the whole armor of God.
with the sword of St. Michael. God bless you.
God bless.